and welcome to Telewizja Republika. Start with a major development from the International Criminal Court, which has just issued arrest warrants for Russia's Chief of General Staff, General Valery Gerasimov, and Sergei Shoigu, former defense minister. They are charged with directing attacks on civilian objects and other war crimes related to strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. Wow! Everybody knows for many years those two bastards are responsible for various crimes committed by the Russian Federation. Finally, well, it's also an empty gesture, because I do not think that we will see them behind the bars anytime soon. But someday, who knows? Nuremberg actually happened years ago, so maybe in the future. Moving on, in an interview with the Philadelphia Inquirer, Lieutenant General Kirill Budanov, Ukraine's military intelligence head of it, reported that while Western military aid to Ukraine has increased, the supplies necessary to significantly alter frontline dynamics will not be available until later in the summer. Significant impacts may only be felt by mid to late July. Budanov specifically mentioned that the awaited US and European weapons, including long-range ATACMS missiles, are critical, but the delivery volumes remain a concern. On the covert operations front, operatives from the Ukraine military intelligence HUR, the one that Budanov is heading, have successfully detonated an ammunition depot in Russia's Voronezh Oblast, causing extensive damage. The targeted depot in the Olkovatsky district was hit on June 25th, leading to a large-scale explosion and fire, demonstrating the reach of Ukraine's military intelligence capabilities. In a bizarre twist, Kremlin officials have tried to associate the Ukraine missile strike on military targets in Sevastopol, Crimea, with a separate terrorist attack in Dagestan on the same day, suggesting a conspiracy involving Ukraine and the US. Despite these claims, there's no evidence linking the two incidents, and the suggestion overlooks Russia's documented ties with Iran and the involvement of figures like Putin's lapdog Ramzan Kadyrov, known for his connections to state-sponsored terrorism. We've seen millions of examples of Russia being involved in exactly this kind of things that we actually see right now in Dagestan. Finally, in international relations, the US Senate Department has confirmed that North Korea provided Russia with artillery ammunition and long-range missiles during a recent visit by Russian President Vladimir Putin to Pyongyang. This transaction raises significant concerns about the types of concessions North Korea might receive in return, possibly related to its nuclear or missile development ambitions. Yes, nothing changed in terms of that guy. You know who. Kim Jong. Fat Boy Kim, that's the way we call it on our program, and that's what we are going to talk about on my show. My name is Michał. This is Rachon. And we roll in.
Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go!
We haven't been here for a while. We've been traveling, and we've been to US East Coast, traveling and meeting people in New York and DC, but we are back in business, and Joe Lindsley is again with us on Telewizja Republika. Joe, great to see you again. Where are you now? Lviv?
Michał, hello from Lviv, here in Western Ukraine. I've been here for about a month, I do hope soon to be able to return to Kharkiv, that city that's been so heavily hit, but so resilient. Here in Lviv, it's been pretty calm, but we have to note, I mean, the Russians have dealt some major blows to the power infrastructure. So very often you hear the hum of generators throughout the city, but other than that, it's calm here at the moment.
As always, during this war, every calm is a calm before the storm. Joe, before we start, because there are lots of things going on in Ukraine and actually around Ukraine on the front lines of the Russian-Ukrainian war, I would like to have your opinion about the ways we should perceive and understand the internal American debate with the presidential election ahead in November. and the Russian war against Ukraine being one of the most important topics of this presidential campaign, because it seems to me that we got some different views on the issue within the conservative movement itself, between different style Republicans, different streams within the right-wing American policies, and that, in a way, is one of the defining discussions. At least this is the way I view it. Probably most of the people view it in this upcoming presidential election. What do you make of it?
Well, I think first there's a distinction between, regular people, Democrats and Republicans who believe in freedom, and they see that Ukraine is the story of freedom. Ukrainians are actually people willing to die for that. Everyone I know who comes here from America, whether they're on the left or the right, they see beyond our partisan politics. But if you look in Washington and if you look at the presidential race, we see whether it is President Biden and his team or also President Trump and often his team, they often speak about Ukraine in a very inaccurate way with misleading information. And one of probably the cornerstone of this is the amount of money that this Ukraine's resistance is allegedly costing the U.S. So, for example, a couple of weeks ago at the Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA conference, President Trump gave a speech, and the media, of course, misinterpreted the way he was speaking. He was actually, I think, sincerely praising President Zelensky. He said, "I like the guy." He said, when Trump was impeached the first time because of his phone call with President Zelensky in July 2019, and President Zelensky did not attack Trump. He actually defended him then. He said, look, there was nothing wrong with that phone call. And so Trump, in his speech, actually said, look, Zelensky is a good guy. He's stood by me. But then he went and said that Zelensky's a great salesman. And he said this in both a way of praising him, but also being critical. But Trump in that speech was critical of Washington, because he says that every time President Zelensky goes to Washington, he leaves with $60 billion. And here's where we get to the misinformation and actually just absolutely incorrect information. Both the White House and the opposition, so both the White House and Trump, will push this idea that, the United States has given X amount of billions of dollars to Ukraine. Most recently, that $60 billion supplemental. And that's not actually $60 billion that's coming to Ukraine. If you they have big teams, they can look at the details and know the truth. Most of that money stays in the United States. The money, the portion of that money, the so-called, that comes to Ukraine is the valuation of old equipment that the United States is not using, like these long-range ATACMS that were just used in Crimea.
But Joe, this is exactly the point in a way, because when I talk to people, and I spent the last week talking mainly about the Russian activity in the Eastern Europe and Ukraine, the main talking point is the number that you mentioned versus what is called the American industrial military complex. And in a way, this is exactly what states like Poland, like Ukraine need. I mean, we do really need products of the American industrial complex, but that's the perspective of the people who live here and know the nature of the Russian threat. Because on the other hand, we got the voters who live thousands of miles away from the front lines and who are asking the questions about the money that they're spending on some certain geopolitical strategies and choices that were made by politicians, basically. And they ask a question: what do we get for the dollar that we pay for it?
Well, the first thing we have to realize, we're not paying that amount of money. The money, figure is a lie, because this is the typical Washington accounting. Most of what comes to Ukraine is weapons that America bought and paid for a long time ago. We're not giving Ukraine our newest stuff. We're certainly not sending our F-16s, by the way. But like these ATACMS, there were more than 3,000 long-range ATACMS, long-range missile systems sitting in the U.S., not being used. Many of them past their date of expiration. And so to get that $60 billion figure, we include how much, the valuation, how much are they worth, even though we already paid for them. And then, crucially, money in that package is to buy new weapons for the United States. The Pentagon is always buying new weapons. We're always innovating. And so right now, when the Pentagon buys new weapons, they shove it into the Ukraine package. But we would still be spending that money anyway to protect the United States. So that figure is absolutely 100% misleading. The United States is actually benefiting. In fact, 2023 was the best year ever for sales of American defense products, because the longer, and this is where the military industrial complex comes in, I think a lot of them don't want quick victory for Ukraine because they profit the longer this goes on. Because as we've seen, two things happen. One, Ukrainians show the amazing things that American weapons can do, such as what the ATACMS did in Crimea. And this was totally ignored in the headlines. We can talk about it. But about 24 hours ago, or more than 36 hours ago, Ukrainians used American precision ATACMS to hit one of Russia's key communications bases in the Crimean Peninsula. This is what Russia used to communicate with its satellites and to launch attacks. It was a huge victory for Ukraine because of these precision weapons from America. And when other countries see just how precise and effective those weapons are, they want to buy them. Then secondly, another thing happens. The longer this goes on, the more Poland and Germany and other countries get afraid of the Russian threat, that this won't be solved soon, the more they want to buy weapons from America. So the American defense industry has a great incentive to give Ukraine enough to stay alive, but then to keep this process slow and to push victory off so that Europe and the West get afraid so that they buy more American weapons. That's what's happening.
And that's, in a way, something that is understandable. I mean, the effectiveness of the U.S. weapons are proved in this war. That's for sure. Joe, so what actually happened in Crimea? Social media networks are covered with the footage taken on the sandy beaches of Crimea. Well, we have to be aware this is a stolen territory. This is the territory and place that belongs to Ukraine, legally belongs to Ukraine. Russia is occupying it. So I got a feeling that actually the idea of pushing those videos to the world online community aims to target and to frame those people who are having, sand baths on the sandy beaches of Sevastopol, feel and be portrayed as a victims. But the truth is that Russia stole the Crimea, and we are talking about the justified targets, which of course are not civilians on the beaches, but the infrastructure that is basically used over there to attack Ukraine.
Well, as I've seen reporting here, I speak every single day on Chicago radio, and I speak live, and I realize the power of Russian propaganda and how easily you get sucked into it. Consider these three headlines. The BBC in the past 24 hours said, Ukraine war, Russia blames U.S. and vows response for Crimea deaths. The Guardian said, Moscow warns of retaliation after blaming the United States for deadly Ukrainian attack. And CNN says, at least 5 dead after missile fragments scatter over beachgoers in Russian-occupied Crimea. None of those headlines, and most of these stories, don't mention the big thing that happened. Ukraine used precision American weapons, the ATACMS, which they finally got permission to use with a bipartisan effort from Washington in April. They used these ATACMS to hit one of Russia's most strategic and important and valuable communication center, a space communication center that coordinates Russian satellites, that helps Russia coordinate communications and attacks on Ukraine. This was an example, this should be an example of what happens when America sends powerful weapons to Ukraine, that they actually work very precisely.
Yeah,
and
but no one is talking about it, as you mentioned.
Well, of course, yeah, and there's another thing that no one's talking. So, because Russia's the school shooter of nations. They're the best victims in the world. And we're victims. We're going to make everyone miserable, and they're very good at shifting the narrative. And that's where, like for example, even pro-Ukraine people, instead of talking about Ukraine's success using these American weapons, they're saying, going into the details, saying, well, no, it was Russian air defense that killed the people on the beach. And even once you get into those details, you're speaking on Russian terms. You're ignoring the major headlines. First, the major headline, Ukraine's great success using the precision ATACMS. Secondly, what did Russia do over the past 48 hours in Kharkiv city? No one's talking about it. For about a month, Kharkiv became peaceful ever since the White House finally gave Ukraine permission to hit Russian military targets in a very limited way near Kharkiv city. We saw results. the Russians were not able easily to attack Kharkiv for the past month, and Kharkiv was safer. But here's what happened. Washington gave a limit. They said a 100-kilometer limit into Russia. So what happened? Russia had about 3 or 4 weeks to move its launch points 100 kilometers deeper into Russia. And now what do we see happening over the weekend? Now Russia is once again pounding the hell out of Kharkiv city, including killing civilians, including injuring children. That's happening every day once again. That story is missed because
yeah, and
the way
it's
Russians
nowhere
have
in the
manipulated.
headlines as if bombing of Kharkiv by Russia was something less interesting than hitting the Crimea by Ukraine. That's the reality of the info war that we are watching.
Yeah, and crucially, I mean, so the bombs that Russia's been using on Kharkiv are glide bombs. They are not precise. Russia claimed they hit a police hospital, which, by the way, that would still be a violation of Geneva Conventions, but they couldn't even hit that because these weapons are not precise. Inherently, they're going to hit civilians. But what Ukraine used in Crimea were incredibly precise ATACMS. There is zero chance with these precision American weapons that Ukrainians would hit a beach. They're not. They have very limited weapons like this. They have to prove that they work. Of course, they're going to hit a good target, and they did. We have satellite evidence. The only reason why anyone was hurt is because Russian air defense is not so good. It's been weakened, and it hit civilians who should not have been on a beach. I mean, A, Russians should not be in Crimea. When Ukraine was in control of Crimea, there were no missile strikes, A. But B, Russia should not allow people to be on a beach near such a prime military facility. But if Ukrainians are never permitted, if Russians are going to put civilians there and Ukrainians are never permitted to hit these facilities, thousands of Ukrainians are going to continue to die either at the front line or in the cities. And so that's where we have to turn this around and see what's really happening. Russians are using imprecise bombs in Kharkiv city now, once again, on a daily basis. And Ukrainians are using precise weapons to hit Russian military positions while Russians are, with their sloppy air defense, killing their own people. That's the headline.
So, what has changed in the reality of the Russian war against Ukraine since U.S. allowed using weapons provided by U.S. on Russian territory?
Well, there's two things have happened. One is positive and one's more difficult. On the positive sense, we saw that Kharkiv was, it became safe. Kharkiv was often being hit in May several times a day, and it was terrible. For the first time, I really heard people speaking with fear in their voice. And ever since this permission was given, the Russian advances were stopped on the ground, and Kharkiv city was safer, noticeably. You'd go days and days and days without any attack whatsoever. So we saw success. But then, as always, and we got to that point because there was a unified voice from President Lindsley, from Ukrainians, and from people in the West saying, let Ukraine fire back. And the White House said, okay, finally they said, sure, but they did it in such a limited way. And now we're back to square one because we gave Russia time to adapt. No one talked about, oh, wait, this really worked. Two things, like when Ukraine is able to hit Russians on Russian soil, it makes Ukraine safer. And we see that despite all of its blustering, Russia doesn't have a good response. Russia was weakened. Russia had them change their plans and approach. No one got nuked. Russia was threatening to nuke everyone if we hit things on Russian soil. That doesn't happen. It's not going to happen. And so we don't seem to ever learn the lesson. And that's what's so frustrating now in a city like Kharkiv, that now we're back to square one. And now we have to make all the case again to be able to hit Russian targets on Russian soil. And, when are we going to learn and say, wait, we have the ability to do this and it works and we can make this end more quickly? So this is something that gets, it's a huge point of frustration. We feel like we're in this cycle of having to repeat the same arguments over and over again. But part of it is when Ukraine does have a good success, it's not claimed and portrayed in a very big way. That should have been a major headline. Kharkiv is safe. Ukrainians hit major Russian operations base in Crimea. If those are never in the headlines, then it's hard for politicians in America to convince their voters that this is working, that it's worth the money, even though the money is less than what they say it is. We have to have success stories, which we do have, but no one knows it in America. And so they don't see why this is worth it. And I think that's a big storytelling problem that's really, it's going to factor in these next months. And, I don't understand why the White House won't be more honest about it and say, look, we're not spending as much money as it seems. A lot of this is the price of old equipment. We're helping the American defense industry. I don't know why the White House is dishonest, and I don't know why the White House's opponents, why the Trump campaign is dishonest. It seems that it would benefit Trump to say, why is the White House being dishonest about the numbers? And it would benefit the White House to say we're not actually spending as much as it seems. I don't know why neither side is honest.
The old saying goes that the first victim of every war is truth. So in a way, we may be seeing it right now as we speak. Joe, nothing moved on the F-16 front. Let's put it this way. Over and over again, we are hearing that we are very close, that this is going to happen in a few weeks, few months, and the time passes. We got 2.5 years of war in Ukraine, Russian war in Ukraine. Still no F-16s active. At least we know nothing about it on the Ukrainian sky. However, we've heard experts who claim that what we see on the front line is preparing the airspace to safely digest, to put it this way, activity of F-16s when the Russian air defense will be disabled by the using of ATACMS and other weapons. Thomas Steiner spoke 2 weeks ago on our program explaining the way it is strategically being prepared. What do you make of it?
I've heard these arguments that this is being strategically prepared. We can, but after 2 years, I think we have to say, because it's not just about F-16s. It's about, is there a willingness from Washington for Ukraine to win, for Russia to be defeated? And so if we can't even get ATACMS, which was used in Crimea, but if we can't even get ATACMS to be used to protect Kharkiv or places in to hit Russians on Russian soil, then I don't think there's any chance of F-16s, which is a much higher level of equipment. The deeper question is there a will to win? And as a friend, I think maybe I mentioned to you before, a friend who's an F-16 pilot, retired now, he was a top one. He said, it's politically convenient for the United States to promise F-16s. It looks like they're doing something, and it's politically convenient for them to delay it as long as possible. And it bothers a lot of people here in Ukraine and in Sweden, by the way. About a month ago, Sweden was ready to send its Saab-made Gripen fighter jets to Ukraine quickly. They were ready to do it, and they were stopped. Now that they're in NATO, I think they lose some independence. They were stopped by the West, and with this almost unified response from elites in the West saying, no, we're all going to work in the F-16s together. But Ukrainians are saying, well, we could have used those jets a month ago. And, every time, last summer we were promised F-16s by September, and then in September by December, and December by March, and March by June. And here it's, almost the end of June. At some point we have to step back and say, is this a charade? And I think that there's plenty of evidence that it is. It goes, again, to the deep question, does Washington want to win? And here's the last point on this, on the willpower of Washington. We had all the talk of the new round of sanctions from the Biden administration a few weeks ago, and that it caused some chaos and disruptions in Russia. But not a single reporter, as far as I can tell, asked this question: why does the U.S. Treasury Department still give waivers to 10 Russian banks for the sole reason that they are that they do business in the oil and energy business in Russia, that they facilitate oil and energy transactions, and for that very reason, because they work in Russia's most profitable and precious industry, 10 Russian banks are exempted from the sanctions by the U.S. Treasury Department, and the exemptions that expire right before the upcoming American election. That's a question that the press should be asking the White House, because if you're really serious about the sanctions, why would you let the most valuable Russian banks and the most valuable Russian industry do whatever they want?
This question is an open question in a way. You stop and you give away Russia the possibility of selling gas and oil. Russia bankrupts. It's so easy, it's so obvious, so clear, but still, it doesn't happen. Joe, your comment and your info on the fundraisers that you are organizing. What is the way that our viewers can influence and support Ukraine resistance against Russia?
Well, the audience already has in a big way. Especially while Ukraine was waiting for permission to fire back on Russian targets, it was very dangerous in Kharkiv region. And the only way Ukrainians could fight back, hit Russians, was using drones, FPV drones. And so thanks to the audience here and the audience from Chicago, we were able to send a lot of FPV drones to the front, as well as night visions, drone jammers. And so thank you to everyone who supported us at UkrainianFreedomNews.com via PayPal for those types of equipment. And we still, there still is a need for these. But I think especially now that we have need for vehicles and as always for the anti-drone jammers. We've also been working to buy. I mean, one thing we often get specialized requests from units and so lately we've been buying these devices so they can make the drones better. And so there's a lot of innovation happening there, and we're trying to do everything we can to supplement it. So I know lots of guys that are tinkering with drone technology. Thanks to the audience here, we're able to get these guys the tools they need to make these drones better. So UkrainianFreedomNews.com via PayPal. We appreciate that support.
Yeah, and we would like to send a big thank you to all the brave soldiers who are mentioning us in their video reels. Yeah, we see it all, and thank you very much. You are brave people who are fighting evil empire, basically, in its new incarnation. Let's put it this way. Joe, thanks a lot. We see each other next week. Stay safe. Beautiful surroundings. Calm before the storm, as always. During a wartime.
You always feel that way. Thanks. Until next week.
See you soon, Joe. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, you can join us on rackracon.com. That's our website. You can leave us your email. We'll get back to you with our reports on what's going on the front lines of the ongoing war against the West. See you soon. Ciao. Bye-bye.